welcome back. Happy Wednesday to everyone. I am Ginny. You're watching Polly's Paper Studio, and I just wanted to make sure that my long-term viewers knew that they were in the right place because, as you see by the thumbnail, my project does not have bows or flowers on it, but what it does have is a lot of beautiful functionality. So we're using that Park Lane Woodland paper pad as part of our March challenge, and I have altered a notebook adding beautiful pattern papers from that collection. It's much more sturdy and much more functional because we added some beautiful tabbed dividers. So if you are interested in creating this practical and pretty project as well, stick with me and we will make this together. So as I mentioned, we are still working from this Woodland paper pad. It's a Park Lane pad. It came from Joann's, and this has been the inspiration for all of our projects for March. Now, this paper pad is not as large as the standard one that would have 36 pieces. This has just 24. So we are well into our challenge, but we still have about 6 projects left. So I have been collecting all of my offcuts here in the sleeve in the event that I need to utilize this to get through our projects. And we're also going to be using a store-bought base today. Now, I did consider making my own and spiral cutting it, but many of you have mentioned to me that you don't have a spiral cutter, and really I think for the value this was definitely worth it. This was $2.50 from Dollar General. I don't know if it is available from the dollar store. I would check there if you have one closer to you than I do. And if you plan ahead, maybe you could think about ordering them online, maybe in a bulk pack. I think this would make a very thoughtful gift. And so another thing I wanted to mention before we get to work is that I purposefully picked this black cover. There was only a couple colors available, and I want to be able to bring my cardstock all the way up to that spiral. And so I thought if it matched the actual cover on the notebook, that it would look a little bit more intentional and purposeful, and I wouldn't just have a strip of color on the inside of those rings. So that was very intentional. And then I also wanted to show you this particular one is 8 by 5. That's really practical, I think, because it isn't too big or too small. This one is a little bit bendy, as you can see. So adding the layers of paper on the outside and on the inside will definitely improve how sturdy it is. I think these are just so functional and practical to have somewhere to keep notes. For me, I would write down some project ideas or video inspiration. I know that with things being a little bit harder to get a hold of, I have a couple of items that I am keeping my eye on. They're not yet available to order. So I want to write that down and make sure that I check back on it so that I can order them when they become available. There's so many different reasons to take a note. And I think if you make your notebook pretty, you could definitely leave it out or take it with you in your bag. It would be much more sturdy. And so this is just a really good idea to make something that is already practical more functional by adding those dividers. And we're going to make it beautiful. So of course that is going to make it more fun to use. So like I mentioned, this cover is pretty bendy, and we're going to add our cardstock to it. I'm going to cover the front and back, and I'm going to leave the folded section on the right hand side. That will just help it to be a little bit more sturdy, and the feel of it will be nicer not to have a cut edge here. So I've got my cardstock cut, and this is just 65-pound weight. I would say this is a good place to be for a notebook that already has the pages in it, because you can't add too much bulk before it gets a little bit misshapen. So I have my first piece. This is going to be the measurements for the front and the back cover. It's 10.5 inches wide and 8 inches tall. I scored it at 5 1/4, and yes, I realize that it's going to extend beyond the edge of the notebook, and I did that because the dividers I want to add are tabbed, and I need to protect them from wear and tear. So my tab dividers are going to fall within this measurement and be inside the cover, and that way they will be protected. So the first thing I want to do, of course, is to add my double-sided adhesive tape, and for the cover I am going to include that second adhesive. I'm going to put a little Tombow on that just to help it to be more secure. I feel confident about using that on this cover. Even though it's flimsy, it is not going to cause the paper to warp or get misshapen. I definitely would not use that on the inside because this paper is just like regular notebook paper. And so I'm gonna take off only one side of my adhesive, and I think it will just be easier to work with that way. And then I'll come in and add my second line of my adhesive Tombow. If you have art glitter glue, I think that would work well. I would like to try the Lawn Fawn glue. I haven't made an order from them for quite a while, but I think I want to try that just to see. A lot of people seem to be very impressed with it. So I think the easiest thing to do would be to turn my paper over and work on the front first, because basically I want to line it up with this row where the punched holes are and have it even with the holes there and also on the bottom, and that will hopefully keep it square. So this is not exactly 8 inches, even though it says 8 inches. I'm not going to beat myself up over that. If a little bit hangs over, that's okay. That's just because they manufacture these in such a large quantity that, you know, it is just possible that it is not exactly straight and square. But like I said, this is a functional notebook, and so if I get a little bit of that cover sticking out, then I'm okay with that. So I'm gonna peel the second row of my adhesive tape and then add another bead of my Tombow and then just fold this over. So this is basically going to add 2 layers of that heavier cardstock, and we'll add even more when we finish it. So you can see here how there's a little bit of that cover showing just because their cut wasn't square, and that is just fine with me. That's just how it's going to be. So I'm pressing this pretty well, especially the part that hangs over the cover that was already existing. And here is how that's going to look on the front. So definitely looks intentional, and the part that falls in the spiral doesn't really stand out. So I'm going to cover the inside as well as the outside because, you know, it's just a nice way to make it more personal and more beautiful. So this paper had a couple of plaids. I picked this green one because it matched my bird pattern, and so I have this cut to be 7 7/8 wide by 5 1/8 inch tall. And so that's going to leave us the nice border of our black cardstock. When I originally cut my paper for the front of the cover, my piece did have those exact measurements. But when I decided on a layering pattern, I wanted to make sure that I didn't cover those birds up because that was really the inspiration for keeping this pattern whole. Those birds are so beautiful in the birch background, so I just cut some from the top so that I could position it a little bit higher, and that way when I put my border strip on the bottom, it's not going to cover up those beautiful birds. So I'll just flip this around and make sure that my birds are on in the right orientation and get that adhered to the cover. So you can see I cut off maybe 1 inch or so just to move those birds up. Now I've got my first layering pattern. You might recognize this as part of the tags from our 4x4 flip book, and so I'm just going to utilize what I had remaining and cover up where that bird pattern falls short of covering the whole base. So we've got that on here. Now, there were some additional offcuts as I was working along on this project, and I thought this would be a nice addition to this bottom strip here. So this is our second layering pattern, and I put that right in the middle so that I could have a little bit of wood grain on either side. This collection sadly did not have any journaling cards or cut-aparts that had birds on it. So when I got to the cut-apart sheet, I was kind of limited to what I could pick. There were quite a lot of butterflies and some with deer and a fox, but I didn't have one with birds, and I tend not to mix those up if I have a theme going. So I just picked this one particular little card, and it says it's good to be kind, and it has some little purpley flowers that kind of coordinated with that bird. So I really like the foiling on this, and I'm just going to offset this a little bit here, a little bit of layering, not dimension. I'm not putting any foam spacers or any of that here because I don't want to cause this to be hard to write on when you get to your inside page. So when you're working along here, you can still write on it and it will be fine. So this is our front cover, and I'm gonna do basically the same for the back. I'll just go ahead and put that through a little quicker, and I'll give you some music to listen to while I work along. Okay, now you can see that we have added quite a lot of sturdiness to our notebook, as well as the amount of room that we need to have our tab dividers. So the one thing that I wanted to do was make sure that the inside was just as sturdy and nice, but we can't wrap the pages on the inside like we did the cover because we do want to have those tabs. So I've got a couple of different parts here, and this is going to wrap the page and create the divider. So the first thing I want to do is show you my punch board. And so I've got these cut to the same measurement, and I'm just gonna show you really quickly. If you don't have one of these, I definitely recommend it. I use mine all the time. I'm just going to line up the edge of my paper there with the first portion of the punch, and then I'm moving it down to 2 3/4, and this seemed to be a pretty good size for this particular notebook. So then what I did was I brought it to my guillotine cutter, and I lined the very edge up with the indentation here, and then I used the little cutting arm to remove the excess from this side, so I would have the portion that sticks out. For the inside tab, I did basically the same thing, except my first cut was in the middle. Instead of on the end, I put that edge to 2 3/4, and I punched it. I would go ahead and remove the excess, just as I did on the first one, and then flip it over and go down to 2 3/4 again. You see I've got my tab, and then I would remove the excess. So it would be straight across here with the tab sticking up, and that helped to position it right in the middle. And that's what you want with tabs, so that you can see them all as you flip through. So this has a couple of different pieces, and the first one is going to be 8 inches, the full 8 inches by 5. And then I cut my tab from that and remove the excess. So this is 5 inches wide at the top of the tab. So now I have my pattern paper. This is gonna be 4.5 by 7 7/8. And so that's gonna give me the outline of that beautiful black cardstock. And I'll just center that here. The second piece I have is 4 5/8. by 8. And then the inside is 4.5 by 7 7/8. This is going to be on one side and then the other side. So I think the best way to do this is just kind of eyeball the middle. You could count these out if that mattered to you to get them exact, but it doesn't really mean that much to me to get them to be precise. I just want 3 definite sections. So I'll take my paper off again. So now what I'm gonna do is line this up, the outside of the page with the outside of this. What I'm trying to avoid is adding a lot of additional bulk close to the spiral so that it isn't going to create a lot of bulk in the middle. So I'm just going to line this up with the edge. So now you can see this would be the back side of the tab, and then the second piece will go on just right up to the edge. Again, this one will be a little easier to get on because the paper is much sturdier now with the additional paper layers. So I'll just flip that over and line that up. I think this would be an excellent holiday planner if you had people coming for Christmas or you're taking notes about gifts or that type of thing. So here is your divider. Okay, so now we've got 2 more dividers to add, the middle one and the top one. I think the best way to do this would be to divide what is left, and then I'll add my sections on to that. When I got to the third tabbed divider section, I was more aware of getting some frugal use out of those offcuts, because remember, we still have a fair amount of projects left to get through. So I went ahead and just paper pieced these so that I would have the same patterns and it would coordinate nicely, but we didn't waste any of the paper to create additional pages. Okay, so there is our notebook. We've got our beautiful sturdy cover, lots of pages inside for writing. The tab dividers are protected with the extra length that we added to the cover. I think you could also include some pictures or journaling to make this more of a memory keeping kind of notebook situation. And then each of these has the tab. So when you are ready to use this, you would obviously write on the tabs what the section was intended for, and that way you could be a little bit more organized and keep all of your notes separate. So that's all for our project today. I hope you will consider joining me on Friday for the next project in our March series. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure you leave me a comment. And if you're not already, I would love for you to subscribe. As always, I'm wishing you a happy and productive day, and I thank you so much for watching. Bye.